It is arguably the biggest game of the regular season for the Memphis Grizzlies, fighting for their number one seed lives in Denver against the Nuggets. However, chances are, if you did a quick news search on the Memphis Grizzlies, a big preview of a showdown in the West would not be the first thing that comes up. On this episode of Locked On Grizzlies, we'll talk about that game, don't you worry. But we got to lead off with the distraction that is, for better or worse, the Ja Morant situation off the floor for the Grizzlies. Let's lock in.
You are Locked On Grizzlies, your daily Memphis Grizzlies podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to Locked On Grizzlies, a proud member of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team each and every day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts. We are also available on YouTube. Like, comment, rate, review, subscribe. However you get your podcasts, however you take in your NBA content, hopefully you will make Locked On Grizzlies a part of that process each and every weekday. I am Joe Mullinax, one of your hosts for Locked On Grizzlies. I am now a Grizzlies columnist over at Bluff City Media. I also do some NBA writing for SB Nation NBA and Fansided. I'm joined once again, thankfully, by my tremendous co-hosts, the talented, the gifted, the handsome, DeMichael Cole of the Commercial Appeal.
You use that handsome word. You got to be careful around here, Joe.
I do. Yeah, the commenters, they'll get you.
glad to have the tandem back together. But I mean, Joe, you just mentioned it. So much to uncover with this team on and off the floor. And it's, the thing about covering the Grizzlies, just over the past couple years, the Ja Morant era, this young core era, so to speak. You know what I've learned, Joe? They've become one of the biggest talks of the NBA. And Joe, when you reach that level, it gets to the point where every little thing you do, Joe, you may think it's this, but to the league, it can be this. And that's happened a few times, not just with Ja Morant, who we're going to talk about, but it's just happened. It happened with the Jaren Jackson thing on Reddit, right? That's where the Grizzlies are. They are one of those teams now, and there is an adjustment that is kind of underway, as we're seeing right now.
Absolutely. I live in Virginia. We were talking a little bit before we started recording, and the attention paid to this team is vastly different now than it was 10 years ago. And a major reason for that is Ja Morant. Obviously, the grit and grind Grizzlies were very good at basketball, just like these Grizzlies are very good at basketball. But at the same time, Ja Morant being a superstar changes the perspective, changes the narrative, the calculus, so to speak. And that leads us to our opening conversation here, DeMichael, about Ja and how he has found himself fairly or unfairly in the midst of some drama off the court, whether it is the allegations of him. Well, it's not necessarily allegations. Ja admitted to doing it, punching the 17-year-old in the face repeatedly at a pickup basketball game. The allegations of whether or not he had a gun, pointed the gun, waved the gun, that's all incorrect, or at least not what was alleged and what's in the police report. There's the incident at, the Wolf Chase Mall, I believe, there in Memphis, which has a Finish Line shoe store with the mom of Ja. And mom was having an issue at the store, and Ja and his associates roll up and show up, and there's an altercation that was documented.
Yep.
We could go, there's a few different stories like that, as you alluded to. My biggest takeaway from it all, DeMichael, as I mentioned in our opening, the Memphis Grizzlies are one of the best teams in the NBA. Like I said, they are quite literally tonight playing for their one seed lives. If they lose to the Denver Nuggets tonight, the best they probably can do is the 2 seed in the Western Conference. And maybe that's the reality as it is, but it's certainly done after tonight. And it's a big game, 1 versus 2. It's on national television. You would think that would be the lead story, even though it's against 2 teams in the NBA that aren't necessarily marquee names. Yeah. However, Ja Morant is the story. And whether or not these things are true, whether or not a reporter for the Washington Post said something incorrectly that, got more views than the retraction. You can go around and around and around. The fact remains that perception is reality. And in the court of public opinion, again, I don't live in Memphis. I live outside of that bubble. I interact with people on a daily basis that know that I'm interested in the Grizzlies. In those limited sample size conversations, DeMichael, in the court of public opinion, Ja Morant is losing right now. And while that may not be significant to Nike right now, and that may not be significant to Powerade right now, and even the NBA has done their investigations, the incident with the Pacers, other looking intos, and nothing has been fully pressed against Ja. The fact that these stories keep happening, you have to be a little more aware of your surroundings if you're somebody like Ja Morant.
I think that's the simplest way to put it. It's quite that simple. You don't see, Jason Tatum, Devin Booker, even, Anthony Edwards, and, a lot of these other young, talented star players constantly being put in these situations. Whether you feel like the situations are deserved or not, all of that is a completely different conversation of what I'm saying here. My point is the fact that there was the Pacers incident. The Washington Post felt the need to report on the mall incident. There was, the incident at, his home with the 17-year-old and things like that. The fact that there is point, but the fact that those things have happened kind of, leads people to exaggerate it a little bit. I've seen people say the comparison with Allen Iverson, good in a good way. Right. I've been one of those people. I see it, and I stayed in Philly 2.5 years. You see a lot of Allen Iverson in Ja Morant. The cultural aspect, I write about it a lot. I talk about it a lot. Just his cultural significance to Memphis. People in Memphis say it all the time. You heard him, Joe. It feels like he's from here because he wears the grills. He loves the hip hop music culture, and he talks with that swagger. He carries himself, like a lot of Memphians do. But to the other side of that, he is on a pedestal now that no player played for the Memphis Grizzlies has ever been before. If we're talking about, some role player, I was going to name some guys, but we're just talking about a role player, Joe, having that mall situation. I don't think it gets reported on. No. I think the story is it's Ja Morant's mother. It's not a rookie or, a guy who's averaging 2 points off the bench or anything like that. It's the pedestal that he's being put on. And I think, there are some conversations that should be had like, hey, be careful. You can't move like everyone else. And I will add this, Joe, and then I'll let you say what you want to say on that. But I'm in the locker room a lot with Ja Morant, around Ja Morant a lot. And just through conversations with him, what I perceive in a lot of these situations is Ja is a 23-year-old who has a lot on his plate. And he kind of wants to be like a 23-year-old, but he's not your normal 23-year-old. He has the midnight, colorway shoes because, he goes out at midnight. But he gets up, as we've seen, on his documentary on YouTube. There was literally the one episode, he's in Phoenix. They party all night, and he gets up first thing in the morning. That's on there to show, his work ethic. So that shows to me he wants to be that 23-year-old. He wants to have that fun. But the pedestal that he's on is something that he has to adjust to.
Yeah, Matt Hardlicka, who I used to work with over at Grizzly Bear Blues years ago. I respect Matt a lot. He has a great Patreon page. He tweeted this out, and it kind of surmises my thoughts on it all exactly. And I want to make clear, I could never empathize, relate, being that young, that successful, the way that Ja Morant came up. I can't fully connect to that. And I'm not trying to, emulate that experience in any way, shape, or form. But I do think this is very fair. Someone tell John and his friends that they've made it. There are no more wars. The only slights are on the court. The only people who can screw this up are inside his circle, him included. And I think that is perfect. That summarizes my thoughts exactly. There are no battles to be fought anymore unless you're playing against the Golden State Warriors. Like, it doesn't exist. You have made it. You have put yourself in a position to take care not just of your children, but your children's children and your children's children's children. You are talking generational wealth. You are talking being able to bring friends, people that have helped you get to this point in your life and help them be successful, taking care of your parents. At the age of 23, to be able to do all of those things is phenomenal. And he deserves all the credit in the world for the work that he puts in to do that. The only person that can ruin it now is Ja Morant. And I'm not going to say I'm worried just yet, because I do think there's a lot of context that you can't talk about on a 30-minute podcast. But I do believe that he needs to be more aware of that public perception, because perception is reality, whether it's fair or not. Yeah. And I think, especially when you're in the public eye, the way he's going to continue to be, that there has to be some better acknowledgement of that. And I do think that will come. At least I'm optimistic that it will. And now we're going to kind of switch gears here and start getting back into the basketball side of things. We mentioned that Grizzlies Nuggets game, extremely important contest coming up tonight. We're going to break that down for you here on Locked On Grizzlies. But first, this episode of Locked On Grizzlies is brought to you by the Nissan Aria. We're going to talk about Nissan's most electric player of the week. For me, it's Desmond Bane. Desmond Bane was truly electric against the Houston Rockets. We thought Ja Morant might be the get-right game, right, in terms of scoring big on the hapless Houston defense. It was Desmond Bane for the first time in a long time, posting 30 points, first time since he came back from that toe injury. His game was fierce. He was extremely impressive in terms of scoring the basketball. It was a stunning performance that had a lot of powerful moves to the basket, a lot of elegant shots from three. A lot of what Bane brings to the table is similar to the Nissan Aria, which delivers on duality, the combination of fierceness, and elegance. It is a beautiful but strong vehicle. It is the perfect SUV crossover. The 2023 Nissan Aria packs pin-to-your-seat power and premium intelligence all in one EV. The all-new, all-electric 2023 Nissan Aria, the EV for people who love to drive. Shop now at nissanusa.com. Grizzlies Nuggets, back to basketball. Next here on Locked On Grizzlies. Welcome back to Locked On Grizzlies. I am your host, Joe Mullinax, joined by my co-host, DeMichael Cole. Again, it's so wonderful for us to be back together. The Grizzlies decided to have a West Coast road trip as life settled back in for us here. So maybe a couple of nights where we'll still be flying solo here or there, but we'll get back into the normal swing of duo shows sooner rather than later. And we're excited to start our weekend with you. Thank you so much for making us a part of your Friday. Friday night, it feels like a big fight. Grizzlies Nuggets. At least to me, it feels that way, because as I mentioned earlier in the show to Michael, you could very easily argue that this game is the last stand of Memphis trying to push for the number one seed. In terms of the standings, they're closer to the number 3 seed Sacramento Kings now than they are the number 1 Denver Nuggets. A loss here, a future Kings win, that could make that problem a little bit worse. But if the Grizzlies were somehow able to go into Denver and knock off Nikola Jokic's Nuggets, then you have a situation where maybe the 1 seed dream is back alive again. So this is an important contest tonight for Memphis.
Yeah, but I'll say this, Joe. Throw the 1 seed out the window.
Okay. Just
for now. Throw it out the window. It's a 5-game deficit. I think the conversation right now is it's funny to say, the Kings historically are kind of comical, but they aren't going anywhere. Those boys are good. You got to hold them off. This road stretch in totality is a you better believe people in Sacramento are saying this is our chance. Last time the Grizzlies went on the road like this and played this level of competition, they lost all games, all 5. So I think from that perspective, it's more about holding the fort now at this point. And that's where the Grizzlies are at this point. 2 games up on Sacramento, 5 games away from the Nuggets. It's hard for me to see them being 5 games better than the Nuggets throughout the rest of the season. But it starts with holding off Sacramento, holding off, the Suns, the Clippers, who are going to get, 2-3 swings? The Clippers get 2-3 more swings at the Grizzlies for the remainder of the season. So even though they're 4 or so games behind the Grizzlies, they can look at it as simple as, hey, if we beat them the 3 times head-to-head, all we have to do is make up 1 game. It can be that simple. So there's a lot to unpack there, but the Nuggets are good, Joe. And not only are they good, it's the home record, 28-4 on their own floor. The Grizzlies are great at home. The Grizzlies, for a majority of the season, have had the best record at home until, a couple recent hiccups. But 28-4, the altitude, I've said, everyone's heard me say it at this point. I feel like in a playoff series, the Grizzlies match up well against these dudes. This isn't one of the teams where I say if the Grizzlies play them, it's you're looking at trouble. The Nuggets are trouble, but in this case, I don't think this is the biggest example of, a team that can beat the Grizzlies long term. But I tell you what, the Nuggets right now, the way Jokic is playing, they're going to get Aaron Gordon back, Jamal Murray, Michael Porter Jr. They have weapons. The Grizzlies won't have Steven Adams in this game. All of those things matter in this contest to me, Joe.
I think those are fair points. I think the 1 seed is still within reach. It's not within reach if they lose this game, obviously.
You got to reach pretty far for that 1 seed, Joe.
But they'd only be down 4 with about 20 to go, or a little bit less than 20. No, it'd be exactly 20 after this.
Yep.
20 to go, 4 down. Denver is playing a schedule that is not necessarily overly difficult, but it's also harder than the Grizzlies' schedule. Denver has a game against the Bucks, 76ers. They have a couple games against the Nets still, which could be hit or miss depending on how Brooklyn's playing at that time. They play the Kings that you mentioned a moment ago.
Yep.
You and I are just kind of on different ends of the spectrum on this one, which is good. Usually we're agreeing. So I like that we're having a little back and forth. I'm not as worried about the Kings catching Memphis for 2 reasons. One, as I've talked about before, the Kings' schedule is extremely difficult. They have 21 games remaining. They have the 3rd hardest schedule in the NBA, according to Tankathon. Only Toronto and Philly have it harder than Sacramento. So technically the toughest schedule left in the Western Conference belongs to the Kings. And while the Kings have a historically good offense, right, I think only the Denver Nuggets have a better offense in terms of efficiency than Sacramento. The Kings are really bad defensively, and I feel like at some point that's going to catch up to them. Now, in fairness, 3/4 of the way through the season, it hasn't caught up to them yet. But I just combining difficulty of schedule with the lack of defensive prowess, I think that they go through a 5-game cold streak, they're going to be 1-4, right? They don't really have the ability to survive a poor shooting stroke or a poor shooting run because of their defensive issues. So
what about the Clippers and the Suns?
Clippers and the Suns have tough schedules coming up too. But again, the Grizzlies have to play the Clippers 3 times. You're exactly right about that. And they have to play the Mavericks 3 times. But even with all of that under consideration, Memphis still is seen as having one of the easier schedules left. So for every game against the Clippers, there's a game against the Rockets. For every game against the Mavericks, there's a game against the Bulls, I think, or something like that. So they're going to have opportunities to rack up wins in other places, even if they were to play poorly against the Clippers and Mavericks. Oh, by the way, the Grizzlies have better records than the Clippers and Mavericks and are technically better teams, or a better team than them. For this game tonight, you mentioned Aaron Gordon. I think he's the X factor. He didn't play against the Grizzlies last week, and I think that's going to matter a good bit because that is going to likely be the defensive assignment for Jaren Jackson Jr. Gordon is a pretty willful scorer, pretty talented guy who he himself maybe had a slight beef in terms of not being able to be an all-star this past season. He is remarkably important for this Nuggets team, and he is that final piece to the puzzle that makes that Nuggets starting 5 of Murray, Caldwell Pope, who's also quietly having a really good season, Michael Porter Jr., Gordon, and Jokic. Obviously, Jokic being the biggest factor. Those 3 guys are one of the best, or those 5 guys, are one of the best starting lineups in the entire NBA. I think that how they handle Gordon, how Jaren in particular is able to still be that free safety defender while defending Gordon. It's easy to say Tillman has to try to stop Jokic again, but it's going to be extremely difficult for him to do that. I think Jaren against Gordon makes a little more sense in terms of being an X factor because Jokic is going to get his.
Yeah, Jokic is going to get his, and you have to, minimize him in some type of way. In this past game, we saw what Xavier Tillman and just the team defense in general held Jokic to 2 or 3 assists, in that game. He averages around 10. So that's just not, a normal night for him. You have to limit him in some type of way. If he's gonna get the assists and the rebounds, we'll hold him to under 20 points. Those things are possible, but that's kind of how you limit his impact. The guy is, he's a triple threat. He's one of the best rebounders. He's a efficient scorer. He's one of, if not the best passer in basketball. But there are ways to attack him. Defensively, the Grizzlies got guys like Ja Morant. Desmond Bane has done a better job at getting to the rim. Those guys are going to attack him, and that's where Aaron Gordon comes into play, right? Aaron Gordon is, for all accounts, he's a pretty solid defender. He's also a big-time athlete, as most of you know. So all those things considered, I think now that the Nuggets are healthier, this game is going to be really interesting. I want to see how the Grizzlies just respond to the adversity that they're probably going to face, playing in the altitude, playing a healthy Nuggets team.
Mm-hmm.
But this is a team. I mean, I've been on the record saying they match up well against the Nuggets. So here we go.
One of the interesting things about Jokic that the Grizzlies did against Houston that they probably won't do as much against Denver, backing like Sengun, forgive me for the mispronunciation if it happens.
Yeah.
He got double teamed a lot in the post by Memphis. You saw Jaren come over. They were trying to force a bad pass, that sort of thing, make him make a young player mistake. You double Jokic in the post, he's going to find the open scorer. And he's averaging a triple-double with assists being one of those 3 things that he's in the trip-dub range for. So Jokic is an entirely different animal. I think Tillman played out of his mind against Jokic last Saturday. Can he do that again? I wouldn't bet on it. But at the same time, I wouldn't have bet on him having the run of games that he has had. Obviously, DeMichael and I have talked about Tillman on this show before. It's impressive that he's doing what he's doing. I'll tip my cap in that way. The Grizzlies obviously have another game this weekend against the Clippers on Sunday as they head for 2 games in Los Angeles to round out their road trip. DeMichael and I will talk about that next here on Locked On Grizzlies. But first, DeMichael, you know what time it is? It's time for Built Bar. I love me some Built Bars. They are a delicious treat without all the fat and calories. You got to try yourself a Built Bar. I'm still training for that 10K. I hurt my hip recently, so I've been resting a bit, trying to heal up. But if you're like me, you're trying to get into shape, eat a little bit healthier, you don't want to compromise taste, you got to try Built. Healthy is actually tasty with Built. 100% real chocolate, flavors like churro, peanut butter brownie, coconut almond, which is my personal favorite. 130 calories, 4 grams of sugar, and a whopping 17 grams of protein. It's phenomenal with Built. And you don't even need to wait and by going to Built.com and placing an order anymore. If you just got to get your fix, you can head to your local Walmart or Sam's Club. Walmart has 4-bar boxes of cookies and cream, double chocolate or coconut puffs. If you're close to a Sam's Club, you can go get a brownie batter or churro, 13-bar box. Built bars are amazing. Can't recommend them enough. I highly suggest you go to Built.com, place an order, or if you just got to get some now, go to your local Walmart or Sam's Club. We'll be talking Grizzlies Clippers, rounding out this episode of Locked On Grizzlies next. Stay with us. Welcome back to Locked On Grizzlies. I am one of your hosts, Joe Mullinax of Bluff City Media. Still kind of new and weird to say that, but excited to be over there at Bluff City Media. Thanks to everybody who has checked out Bluff City Media so far, all the subscriptions. We've had a very successful first couple of days, so thank you for that. As Grizzly Bear Blues makes that transition away from Vox and SB Nation over to BCM, locally owned, operated. It's nice to be under that local Memphis flag now. And my co-host, of course, very, very local in terms of the commercial appeal, DeMichael Cole, the Grizzlies beat writer. So shout out to him for all the great work he does over there. DeMichael, we talked about the Nuggets earlier in the show, and obviously there's another game, and folks won't hear from us, or one of us, whoever it might be, until Monday. So the Clippers are coming up, and the Clippers are an interesting team because of the addition of Brody himself, Russell Westbrook. Here's one of the more polarizing players in the National Basketball Association at this point. I watch Westbrook play, and obviously Morant is similar to Westbrook. I think the the direct comparison is lazy. They're not exactly the same. But in terms of athleticism, they're the same. And Westbrook, even though he's older, not quite in his prime anymore, he can still get to the basket whenever he wants. But the thing about Westbrook is he has to be surrounded by other talented scorers and shooters. When Paul George and Kawhi Leonard are on the floor, and other Clippers, of course, obviously that's a little bit more likely to happen. But I'm curious as to your take on the Westbrook fit in Los Angeles. Again, it seems like every other night, will Kawhi play? Won't he play? You know, the load management stuff has gotten a lot of run lately. Maybe that's a topic for one of our episodes next week.
Yeah.
But in terms of the Clippers in particular, how do you view them? This is one of those three, as we mentioned earlier in the show, three upcoming games with the Clippers in the last 20 for Memphis.
The Clippers are one of those teams where they match up really well against certain opponents and they get embarrassed against others.
Mm-hmm.
In the past, in the playoffs, they could torch Rudy Gobert in the Jazz whenever they wanted to. Didn't even need a fully healthy team to beat them. Against the Mavericks, Luka was a handful for them.
Mm-hmm.
But what I've learned about that team, how this correlates to the Grizzlies, is you look at the Clippers. I make the joke that teams got more wings than KFC. You know, that's how they line them up. So that team is all they get. A couple point guards, you got a couple big men, Mason Plumlee and Zubac, and after that, it's like, all right, everybody else, we expect you to play the 2 through the 4, and I mean, really 2 through the 5 in cases of guys like Batum, Covington, Marcus Morris. Those guys are getting minutes at the 5 in certain situations. So with that being said, you can do that when Brandon Clark's on the floor. Xavier Tillman, you know, as great as he's been, he's not, you know, some big super offensive threat where you're going to throw him the ball in the low post and say, go destroy Robert Covington. You can't do that with Steven Adams in the lineup. I mean, you can try it. You can say, hey, we're going to play him off the floor on the other end, and you can try your luck. But the reason I don't think you can play him off the floor on the other end is actually a strategy that the Clippers unveiled against Russell Westbrook. They were the first team I saw guard Russell Westbrook with a center, basically saying he's going to sag off you. Come on, come drive at him. You're going to be driving at a center. We're going to give you the shot. You haven't proven that you want to take it. And when you do take it, you don't make it at an efficient clip. So if you're making those, we can live with it. They were the first team I seen do that. A couple teams kind of started to bite on their swag a little bit later and whatnot. But with that being said, the Grizzlies were to match up again. I wouldn't be surprised if in certain situations they throw the center and Xavier Tillman or if Steven Adams is back potentially. I think we will see, you know, upgrading injury status after this, you know, game against the Nuggets, and we'll see, you know, what that update is. But there will be an update in injury status there for Steven Adams, and we'll see if he's able to play in that game. I think he is a swing factor when it comes to playing a team like the Clippers. The Clippers in the fourth quarter, late in the game, they don't want to play Zubac. They don't want to play Plumlee. But if you got Steven Adams, the NBA's top offensive rebounder, on the other end, they don't have a choice, or it's going to be volleyball at the rim. So that's the swing factor. Without Steven Adams, you're playing into their hand. They can play those guys like Covington and Batum and kind of try to, you know, Jaren Jackson Jr. has become a handful inside. But they can, you know, if you put Kawhi Leonard on them, I don't think that's that much of a mismatch. You know, this is a strong dude. So all those things considered, Joe, I think the Russell Westbrook factor actually, it allows you to keep Steven Adams on the floor in those situations. But to get to your original question, I think there is a positive gain to bringing Westbrook to this team, you know, just for his ability to play make, for his ability to get guys involved. And you can tell he's kind of pressing a little bit. He's still trying to learn tendencies and things like that. But there have been times where he's really, you know, taken over at points for this team. So I think that can be a positive game as time goes on for the Clippers.
The thing that makes me nervous about the Clippers is not Russell Westbrook, because I think you're exactly right. Steven Adams can be on Russell Westbrook and kind of negate what Westbrook does to an extent. What makes me nervous is you've got one Dylan Brooks and you've got two Paul George / Kawhi Leonard. Which one is Brooks defending? And Brooks is probably defending Kawhi, right? That's probably the answer. but then that means Paul George is being defended by Desmond Bane. Or if you say that Paul George is a bigger wing, which is true, I think George is bigger than Kawhi is, and you put Dylan on George for that reason, now you've got Bane defending Kawhi. So that makes me nervous in terms of matchups, how the starting five in particular lines up. And lots of teams have that issue, right? Except maybe the Brooklyn Nets with all the different wings they have now. But how you defend both George and Leonard will be interesting. And maybe you say Jaren's one of those guys. But again, if foul trouble is the concern, if you don't want Jaren defending Jokic and Embiid, I don't think I want Jaren on Kawhi Leonard or on Paul George, but that's just me. So I'm curious as to how, obviously, the Grizzlies, I don't think they've seen the Clippers, certainly haven't seen them lately. I don't think they've played it all this season. So 3 games in 20 of the last 20 are going to be against LA. It's going to be a very interesting matchup. I'm looking forward to it. I'm hopeful that Luke Kennard goes off. A revenge game would be nice on Sunday. Fingers crossed for Nuke, who even despite DeMichael not making a single 3 against Houston, being 0 for 4 from beyond the arc, is shooting 43% overall from 3 for the Memphis Grizzlies. So hopefully we see him have a bit of resurgence over the weekend. The Grizzlies.
He's been a great addition. He's been a great addition. I think, we didn't. I think I mentioned it in the last episode. But there's so much more to see with Luke Kennard. Dylan Brooks is at 15 technical fouls. Newsflash. He's going to get number 16 before the season ends.
It's probably going to happen this weekend.
With all these feisty opponents that they got coming up, the Lucas and the Lakers in LA. It's probably going to happen. But when it does happen, there's the potential for Luke Kennard to step into the starting lineup, and maybe you learn some more, you uncover some other things there. So the jury's still out, but I think it's a great start. And maybe he does get some good old revenge against the team that traded him this weekend.
Fingers crossed. We can only hope. And DeMichael and I will be finding out, just like you, as the games play out over the next few days in the NBA. 2 big ones for the Grizzlies this weekend. Thank you so much for making Locked On Grizzlies your first listen today. Now make your second listen Game to Game NBA. Every moment, every top performance, every result. Locked On Game to Game covers every game from across the NBA with local analysis that only Locked On can deliver. Follow Game to Game on Locked On NBA, available on the Odyssey app, YouTube, and wherever you get your podcasts. Next time we're back together will be on Monday. They will play the Clippers late. Again, I'm on the East Coast on Sunday night. So chances are it'll be a DeMichael solo show because I'm old and washed on Monday for you all. And I'm sure DeMichael will happily be talking Clippers, Grizzlies, and all the other fun from the weekend. If you have to go solo, DeMichael, at least you'll be recapping 2 games. That'll help.
That'll help, Joe. But I always miss you, buddy. It's one of those things where we can handle it. You handled it while I was gone, but it's so much better. It's so much better when you're here. So much better when we can bounce those topics off of each other and dialogue and just zoom through the show the way we did today.
I agree. So make sure you turn in on Monday. DeMichael does a great job if and when he's flying solo. But don't worry, I'll be back. I'm not that washed. I'll be back around sooner rather than later. And who knows? Maybe I'll get a breath from the fountain of youth or something. I'll be able to stay up late, or maybe I'll fall asleep in my chair, like what happens most nights now as an old washed man. Thank you so much for making DeMichael and I and Locked On Grizzlies a part of your NBA and Grizzlies experience. Remember, you can subscribe, rate, review, like, comment over on YouTube, wherever you get your podcasts. It's all good. Continue to comment. The comments have really been great over the last several weeks now. We're on a heater there, DeMichael, in terms of good comments. So whether you agree with us, disagree with us, it feels like I'm back at GBB sometimes with people just crushing me in the comments, which is okay. I'm used to it. I have pretty thick skin in that regard. So whether it's good or bad, hit us up. Happy to talk it through with you. I'll reply every once in a while. Thank you so much. However you take in the show, it's appreciated by DeMichael and I. Until next time, have a wonderful weekend. Be safe. Enjoy the games. Stay locked in. That's DeMichael. I'm Joe. This is Locked On Grizzlies.